All right, so let's dive in, jumping the identity S-curve. Hi, I'm Tina. Nice to meet you all. I am an aerospace engineer. This is a picture of me testing my satellite's solar array deployment on a zero-gravity flight. Has anyone else been on a zero-gravity flight? Sometimes called a vomit comet. I'm a pilot and I love flying, and I had the pleasure to meet several folks here that are aspiring pilots, including one over there. And so I encourage you to learn more about flying. My course at MIT was recorded by MIT OpenCourseware, so if you search aerodynamics on YouTube, you can take a look. How did aerospace engineering land me here at an identity conference? Well, I spent a lot of time doing aerospace engineering. At Raytheon, I focused on building large electronic warfare systems. I was very passionate about how we take innovation and apply it to solve our nation's most pressing problems. I was so passionate about it, in fact, that I wrote a book called Innovating in a Secret World. You can read more about it in National Defense Magazine and MIT Sloan. And I was very focused on how do we solve these problems of national security importance. As a result of my work, I had a security clearance, which meant that my fingerprints were stored in the Office of Personnel Management, along with everybody else who had a security clearance. Office of Personnel Management, or OPM, had a database of these biometrics, and it was breached. That was a really eye-opening moment for me. How can it be that in order to prove that I'm Tina, I have to give up my private data such that it's stored in some database and then compromised? So that's what led me to Badge, to solving identity in a way that doesn't store any secrets anywhere. So today we're going to talk about the identity S-curve. Who's familiar with an S-curve? Yeah, a few people. So it really shows the rate of market adoption, which is a nonlinear function. At the beginning, it starts off slow as market leaders take advantage, and then it starts ramping very quickly before it levels off again once you reach market saturation. Right now, centralized identity, that's where we are today. It's characterized by us having to remember a whole bunch of logins to access our applications, and it's characterized by a lot of stored secrets or crown jewels. Let's double click on that for a second. Every person has over 100 digital identities. Every time you try to access your banking, your health care, you have to keep track of all of these different ways to log in. There are billions and billions of authentications each day. What does the authentication process look like? Well, generally it follows this flow. A user, at the time of enrollment or registration, interacts with some device to provide information about themselves that can be used to later authenticate them. Password hashes are stored, biometrics, all those security verification questions, and increasingly geolocation, IP, a lot of the soft behavioral biometrics as well. Then there's a private key. This is usually stored on the device or on the browser, maybe in a token. And it's paired with a public key on the application side. Now, the public key is truly public. It doesn't reveal any information. But the compromise of either the human identity or the private key compromises the whole system. This same flow is replicated for all those 100 digital identities that we have. And you see all these honeypots of crown jewels stored throughout the ecosystem. So that's where we live today. That's centralized identity. What's the next S-curve? cross-domain identity. Well, what do I mean by that? Some highlights of the changes between centralized and cross-domain identity are that instead of the consumer having to remember and maintain digital identities for various products and services that they're accessing, that they could have a reusable identity that can be used for multiple products and services. But it also requires that the enterprise trust that digital identity of the consumer so that that reusability can occur. Okay, so how do we get there? How do we jump the S-curve? Well, one idea is let's bind the device to the identity. Your device is your identity. This is what we've seen pretty much in the industry so far. There are a lot of limitations with this approach. For example, inclusion and equitability issues. It's very expensive if we say that in order for you to access this whole ecosystem, you must have an iPhone. And in fact, you can't even share it with your family members. Everybody has to have their own iPhone. It can lead to a lot of equitability issues when you think about scenarios where that is simply not in the realm of the possible when you're trying to have all of humanity access this ecosystem. There are also a number of use cases that are unsolved by this scenario of binding your identity to a device. Let's talk about a couple of them. Shared devices, sometimes also called the roaming user experience, is pervasive. If you're a bank teller, you need to authenticate to multiple different workstations in a bank branch and across bank branches. If you're a pharmacy worker, you have to authenticate to multiple workstations in a pharmacy and across pharmacies. The same goes for healthcare workers, call center workers, factory floor workers. If you think about transit and transportation, many of us are flying home today. The airline check-in agents, they don't have a dedicated workstation. They have to authenticate to different workstations at an airport and across airports. That doesn't work if your identity is bound to one device. In many cases, it's also not possible to have a second device, like a mobile device, that you carry around with you. There are many reasons for this. One, it's expensive to have all of these users have a separate personal device or even corporate device. A lot of employers said, I have an idea, we'll just make them use their own personal device. Well, one, a lot of people rejected that, but also some states said, even if you use that mobile device just for MFA, you're required to now reimburse that employee for that use. There are also many cases where for security and privacy reasons, like in a banking or healthcare situation, you're not allowed to have a mobile device with you. Same on the factory floor where you're concerned about issues like foreign object debris. Even tokens are not permitted in such environments. So how do you solve this problem of having secure authentication if you're binding your identity to a single device? You can't. This is also pretty prevalent on the consumer side. All of us must authenticate to multiple devices. Phones and tablets, laptops and desktops, kiosks, in-store experiences, drive-thrus. We're people. We interact with the world. And 10 years ago, if you remember going back that far, it wasn't the case that you were tied to one phone, where if you lost your phone today, just imagine, close your eyes for a second, and imagine you just lost your phone. How are you going to get home today? How are you going to check in? How are you going to check out of the hotel, check in to your flight, even navigate, figure out where you're going to go? It's very stressful to think about. But it used to be the case that we could interact with any device at a kiosk or pick up a new device, buy a new device, and be able to interact with it. So there has to be a way to enable that scenario. The problem with binding your device to your identity is also what happens if you lose or break the device. This is the cycle that we've been locked into today. The reason that we can't jump the identity S-curve by binding your identity to your device is that you fall back to a centralized identity scheme the moment you have to do account recovery. The moment that you don't have your device and now you have to re-access your private key. How are you going to do it if it was stored on the device? Really, the only process so far is that you rely on some kind of a central identity that's storing personally identifiable information, or PII, about you, and they have to have expensive processes to try to, and high friction processes to try to reconnect you to your identity and then reissue you a private key on a device. So this is the challenge today, and we heard even from Patrick at yesterday's keynote that in order to open the door to the vision of identity that we all have, we have to solve this fundamental issue of management of these private keys and recovery when you lose your device. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, we get away from binding to your device. Instead, we need to bind you to your identity. Make the human the trust anchor instead of using a device as a proxy for your identity. That is the only way that we can eliminate the storage of crown jewels, all of these secrets and private information, so that you can in fact own your identity and be in control of your identity. So what does this look like in that same authentication flow? Well, leveraging recent advancements in cryptography, it is now possible for the first time ever to eliminate the secrets in the authentication process. You can see with the red X's, elimination of the storage of biometric templates, password hashes, all of those security verification questions, and eliminate the storage of the private key. In fact, with Badge, you can rederive your private key from your authentication factors on demand on any device. That enables a privacy-preserving authentication system where you can enroll once on any device, and now you can lose that device, drop it in a swimming pool, go to a different device, and be able to authenticate without the storage of secrets. What would this look like? Well, it would mean that for the first time you could have user-centric privacy, where you are in control. You can issue and revoke your digital identity and your keys on demand. It also solves those hard use cases that we just talked about, shared devices, roaming user, and consumers that lose and break their devices and get new devices, because you can enroll once and authenticate on any device without being reliant on things like redirects and re-enrollments and resets. And finally, and most importantly, as you've seen from my motivation of being driven here because of the breach of my own biometric data, we have to eliminate the storage of all secret information. And in doing so, we can have a system of authentication that is auto-compliant with privacy standards, CCPA, GDPR, and BIPA, the Biometric Information Privacy Act. But it's important to be able to implement these workflows without disrupting your current environment. Because Badge derives a key, it follows that same flow of private key and public key, and therefore is compatible with existing PKI systems. This is pivotal, as we see here with a number of folks in the room that are driving standards, including Pam here. Standards are very important, And in order for us to operate in an ecosystem of standards, we, rather than creating new paradigms, really need to be able to be non-disruptive to those workflows, even with disruptive technologies. Badges plug and play with OIDC, OAuth, SAML, FIDO, as well as TLS, Kerberos, and other such standards. And to highlight a particular one, the Ping Davinci connector of Badge is now live. So you can take a look at that yourself, and you can see this integration in a drag and drop flow. So if you're implementing your enterprise's workflow environment, or even your consumer's workflow environment, you can just drag and drop this into your existing flows. So I'll wrap up by thinking a little bit about the future of the industry. Really, there are some fundamental privacy challenges that are preventing us from jumping the S-curve. This is a snapshot from Liminal that's talking about reusable digital identities. And when we think again about those 100 digital identities that each of us have, they cross all of these things. You know, how we access our healthcare, our bank, our airlines, our universities, our gaming platforms. How can we have a reusable digital identity that doesn't put the burden on the user to manage and remember and keep track of all those digital identities? Well, the only way we can do that is to meet the fundamental call for privacy and do so in a privacy-preserving way. So just to summarize, I think that we have tried and tried again to jump this identity S-curve with the paradigm of binding your device to your identity. But it has fundamental limitations of inclusion, of use cases, and really it just comes down to, if my identity is on my device and I lose or break it or get a new one, how can I persist my identity without falling back to a centralized PII scheme? And so again, I suggest that we really focus in on making the human the root of trust so that we can jump the identity S-curve once and for all to achieve cross-domain identity. Thank you. Any thoughts or questions? Yes. Thank you.
Quick question. You talked about the recovery of identity using certain factors, even if you use a device, for instance. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sure. So the question is about the different authentication factors that you can use to recover your private key. When we think about the cryptography of how you prove who you are, there's what you know, what you have, and what you are. Today's MFA has really bound the who you are to the what you have, right? Storing the biometric on the device. So the problem is, if you lose the device, you've lost not only what you have, but also what you are. And that brings you back to simply a what you know single factor. Here, what you're able to do with cryptography breakthroughs such as Badge is you can use any combination of those factors to rederive the key. Our customers use any combination of face, fingerprint, voice, PIN code, device characteristics, passive characteristics to derive the key. It's set by an enterprise policy. But for example, you could have use cases where face and passive characteristics can be used as your authentication factors to derive a key. And it can also be used in combination for MFA and step-up use cases. For example, that face allows you to access your bank balance and add PIN or voice in order to authorize a high-risk transaction. And I do encourage you to check your bank balances today, as the stock market has really gone up quite a bit. You'll be happy on this Friday. Great question. Any others? Yes.
So is the process that you're talking about identifying the person, or is it more about the authentication? So I wasn't quite sure how the person was using it.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's about kind of the difference between identification and verification. Here I am talking about verifying, so a one-to-one type of situation as opposed to one-to-many. In this type of situation, which is the case when you're logging in